The first sound was of splintering wood, a crack that split the warm Texas air like a whip. It was sharp, violent, and utterly out of place amidst the cheerful hum of the annual spring fair. For a moment, it was just a sound, an anomaly that caused a few heads to turn, brows furrowed in mild confusion. Then came the second sound, a deep, guttural roar of fury that seemed to shake the very ground, a sound of ancient power unleashed. Panic did not trickle, it erupted. A wave of humanity, dressed in bright spring colors, recoiled as one, a single organism sensing a predator. Laughter died in throats, replaced by sharp, terrified gasps. Popcorn bags and cotton candy clouds were dropped, forgotten on the dusty ground. The source of the terror was a 2,000-pound Charolais bull named Titan, a mountain of muscle and bone the color of old ivory. He was known for his aggression, a creature of pure, untamable force, and he had just shattered the steel-reinforced gate of his enclosure as if it were made of matchsticks. Alarms, shrill and insistent, began to blare across the ranch, a frantic, useless pulse against the primal beat of fear. People scrambled over hay bales and picnic tables, their only instinct to put distance between themselves and the storm of hooves and horns now churning up the earth. In the center of the field, the epicenter of the impending disaster, a single small figure remained. 7-year-old Lily May stood motionless, a tiny island in a sea of chaos. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She simply stood, her small hands unclenched at her sides, her gaze fixed on the approaching giant. The bull's massive head was low, his eyes burning with a wild fire. He was a force of nature, unstoppable, and he was aimed directly at her. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, subscribe right now. It means the world to us, and it ensures you won't miss another story that reminds us of the hope that connects us all. And please, let us know your city or country below. It's truly inspiring to connect with viewers from all over the world. The world for Lily May did not shrink, it sharpened. The cacophony of panicked screams and blaring alarms faded into a distant, muffled hum, like the sound of the ocean heard from inside a seashell. All that existed in her universe was the approaching bull. The ground beneath her worn leather boots vibrated with each thunderous step he took, a rhythm that traveled up her legs and into her chest, a drumbeat counting down to an unknown conclusion. Dust billowed around his colossal form, creating a golden halo in the afternoon sun, making him look less like an animal and more like a mythological creature rising from the earth itself. The ranch hands, brave men who worked with livestock every day, were shouting her name, their voices tight, with a terror she could not process. "Lily, get back! Run, honey, run!" Their words were just sounds, disconnected from meaning. She saw their frantic gestures from the corner of her eye, figures behind fences, their faces pale masks of disbelief and horror. They saw a monster, a 2,000-pound engine of destruction. Lily saw something else. Through the haze of dust and fear, she saw a flicker of something ancient and familiar in those dark, wild eyes. She saw a story that everyone else had forgotten. Her mind, in that suspended moment between cause and effect, did not race forward to what might happen next, but tumbled backward into the warm, safe cocoon of memory. The scene at the fair dissolved, replaced by the scent of hay and rain-soaked earth, the low, comforting light of a lantern hanging from a stable beam. She was 4 years old again, her small hands swallowed in the calloused, gentle grip of her grandmother, Elena. Outside, a storm raged, but inside the old barn, there was only peace and purpose. On a thick bed of straw lay a newborn calf, no bigger than a large dog, shivering violently. He was an orphan, his mother lost to a difficult birth, and he himself was clinging to life by a thread. His coat, which would one day be the color of polished ivory, was then a damp, mucky cream. His breathing was shallow, a fragile flutter in his tiny ribcage. The vet had been kind but pragmatic. "Don't get your hopes up, Elena," he'd said, shaking his head. "He's too weak. Nature has to take its course." But her grandmother had simply smiled, a quiet, knowing expression that Lily had seen 1,000 times. Nature has its own ideas, Doc, she had replied softly, her voice like warm honey. And sometimes it just needs a little help remembering them. Elena was a rancher of the old school. She didn't just manage animals. She understood them. She believed in a language older than words, a silent conversation of touch, intention, and respect. For weeks, that barn became their sanctuary. Lily would watch, mesmerized, as her grandmother worked. Elena would mix warm milk with a special concoction of supplements and honey, testing the temperature on her wrist before guiding the bottle to the calf's weak mouth. She would hum old lullabies, deep, melodic tunes that seemed to soothe the very air in the barn. Lily's job was simple but vital. Her grandmother would guide her small hand to the calf's back. "Gently, little bird," Elena would whisper. "Let him feel that he's not alone. Let him feel the warmth. Animals know. They always know when a heart is kind." Lily would stroke his soft, downy fur, her fingers tracing the map of his bony spine. She would whisper her own secrets to him, stories about her favorite book, about the colors of the sunset, about the fireflies she caught in a jar. She named him Titan, not for the ferocity he would one day possess, but for the immense strength she believed was hiding inside his fragile body, a strength he just needed a little love to unlock. And slowly, miraculously, he began to heal. The bond that formed in that lamplit barn was quiet, profound, and absolute. Titan's first wobbly steps were taken toward the sound of Lily's laughter. His first real nuzzle was against her small cheek, his rough tongue a surprising, ticklish rasp against her skin. He would follow her around the pasture like a loyal shadow, his gangly legs still clumsy. He would lay his head in her lap as she sat under the sprawling live oak tree, its branches a shelter for their secret friendship. Her grandmother would watch them from the porch, her face a portrait of quiet satisfaction. "You see, Lilybird," she'd say, her voice carrying on the breeze. "You didn't just save his body, you gave him a piece of your heart to hold on to. He'll never forget that. An animal's memory for kindness is longer than any fence is high." For 3 years, Titan was not just livestock, he was family. He was Lily's confidant, her gentle giant, the living embodiment of her grandmother's wisdom. He would come when she called, his low rumbles a unique greeting reserved only for her. He was the calm center of her childhood world, a world that felt as safe and permanent as the Texas sky itself. But the sky, as she would learn, could change without warning. The year Lily turned 6, the world tilted on its axis. Her grandmother, the unshakable pillar of her life, grew quiet and frail. The light in her eyes, once as bright as a summer's day, began to dim. The lullabies she hummed grew softer, until one day they faded into silence altogether. The loss was a hollow ache in Lily's chest, a void where warmth and wisdom used to be. The ranch, once a place of life and laughter, felt muted, its colors washed out. In the quiet aftermath of grief, practical decisions were made by voices that did not understand the language of the heart. The ranch was too much for her grandfather to handle alone. It had to be downsized. Titan, now a formidable young bull, was deemed too large, too powerful, and a financial asset that couldn't be ignored. He was sold to a neighboring ranch known for its rodeo stock, a place where bulls were valued for their fury, not their gentleness. The day he left was the second great heartbreak of Lily's young life. She stood by the fence, her fingers curled tightly around the wire, watching as they loaded him onto a large, rattling trailer. He was confused, agitated by the strange men and their prods. He kept turning his massive head, his eyes searching for her, for the one familiar presence in a world suddenly gone wrong. She tried to call his name, but the word caught in her throat, a knot of unshed tears. The last she saw of him was his face through the metal slats of the trailer gate, a face of betrayal and confusion. The gate was a barrier she could not cross, a final, brutal symbol of their separation. And as the truck pulled away, leaving a cloud of dust and sorrow behind, she believed she would never see him again. Now, a year later, in the chaos of the fair, that dusty memory slammed into the present reality. He was here, but he wasn't the gentle giant she remembered. The bull bearing down on her was the animal the rodeo ranch had made him, a creature bred and conditioned for rage. His horns, once small nubs she'd decorated with daisies, were now long, sharp weapons, polished and deadly. The muscles in his neck and shoulders were coiled, springs of power, rippling with aggression. The ranch hands were closer now, moving in a cautious semicircle, their lassos ready but their faces etched with the knowledge of their own futility. One wrong move, one sudden motion, and the bull would charge. They were treating him like a bomb that needed to be defused, and the small girl in the middle was the detonator. "Lily, don't move a muscle." Her father's voice cut through the air, strained with a desperate calm. "Just stay still, sweetheart. We're coming." But Lily barely heard him. Her heart was no longer pounding with fear, but with a strange, aching recognition. She saw past the fury. She saw the frightened calf from the storm. She saw the friend who laid his head in her lap. She knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that the Titan she knew was still in there, buried beneath layers of fear and loneliness. He was just a few yards away now. The heat from his body washed over her. The smell of dust and animal musk filled her nostrils. He stopped. His massive chest heaved, steam jetting from his nostrils in rhythmic puffs. The world held its breath. This was the moment, the pivot point upon which everything would turn. Everyone braced for the inevitable, for the violent, tragic conclusion. They saw a 2-0-pound beast, tormented and enraged, facing a fragile 7-year-old child. A mismatch of horrifying proportions. But then, something impossible happened. The fire in Titan's eyes did not erupt, it flickered. The rage that had propelled him through the gate seemed to stall, confronted by a sight that didn't compute with the reality he had come to know. His world for the past year had been one of shouting men, electric prods, and the tight confines of a pen. It was a world of aggression and defense. This small, still figure before him belonged to a different world, a different time. It was a memory, a scent, a feeling he hadn't accessed in so long. He lowered his massive head, a gesture that the crowd misinterpreted as the prelude to a charge. A collective gasp, sharp and terrified, swept through the onlookers. But it wasn't a charge. He tilted his head, his ears twitching, processing, and then from deep within his chest came a sound that froze everyone in place. It wasn't the roar of fury he'd unleashed before. It was a low, soft rumble, a sound like distant thunder, but without the threat, a questioning sound, a sound of recognition. It was the sound he used to make for her, and only for her, all those years ago, under the shade of the live oak tree. In that deafening silence, punctuated only by the bull's soft rumble, Lily May took a single, deliberate step forward. The crowd gasped again, a sound of pure, unified disbelief. Her father started to vault the fence, his face a mess of love and terror, but one of the old ranch hands put a firm hand on his shoulder. "Wait," the man breathed, his eyes wide with something akin to reverence. "Just wait." Lily did not hesitate. She moved with the simple, unburdened faith of a child. She walked toward the mountain of muscle and horn, her small form looking impossibly delicate against his immense power. She stopped just inches from his face, so close she could feel the warm, damp air from his nostrils on her skin. She raised her hand, slowly, her movements as gentle as they were in the barn all those years ago. Have you ever witnessed a moment so quiet, yet so loud it felt like it could shatter glass? A moment where every law of nature and probability seems to suspend itself, just to watch what happens next. Her small, pale hand, a map of tiny lines and childhood innocence, reached out and rested against the coarse, warm hide of his cheek. She didn't flinch. She didn't tremble. She just touched him. And Titan, the furious, unstoppable beast, leaned into her touch. He closed his giant eyes, and a long, slow sigh escaped him, a sound of release, of homecoming. The tension that had held his body rigid for a year seemed to melt away under the touch of one small hand. He was no longer a monster. He was just Titan. And he was home. The fear that had gripped the fairgrounds did not just dissipate. It transformed. it sublimated into awe. The sight before them was so profoundly gentle, so fundamentally impossible, that it broke through the panic and touched something deeper in everyone who watched. The shouting ceased. The blaring alarms seemed to suddenly fall silent, though they were still ringing. All that mattered was the tableau in the center of the field, the little girl in the dusty boots and the giant bull, whose head was bowed to her touch as if in silent worship. The ranch hands slowly lowered their lassos, their tough, weathered faces slack with wonder. These were men who had seen it all: stampedes, droughts, the raw and often brutal nature of life and death on a ranch, but they had never seen anything like this. This was not about animal handling, this was something else entirely. A story from a book, made real. Lily's father stood frozen by the fence, tears streaming unchecked down his face, not of fear anymore, but of a relief so immense it was painful. He was watching his daughter not only survive, but perform a miracle. She was her mother's daughter, through and through. Lily began to whisper to Titan, her voice too soft for anyone else to hear, but her meaning was clear in the gentle way her fingers stroked his face. She was retelling him their story, reminding him of the lullabies and the warm milk, of the secret shared under the oak tree. And the great bull stood as still as a statue, a willing congregation of one, listening to a sermon only he could understand. The feared beast was gone, and in his place was a symbol of a forgotten promise, a testament to a bond that time and trauma could not erase. The rest of the afternoon unfolded not in chaos, but in a hushed, reverent quiet. The fair was, for all intents and purposes, over, but no one left. They stayed, watching from a respectful distance as a new plan was formed, not by rodeo organizers, but by Lily's family. There was no question of Titan going back to the place that had fueled his rage. A quiet phone call was made. A deal was struck. A debt was paid. Titan was coming home. The journey back to Lily's ranch was the opposite of the one a year ago. There was no rattling trailer, no frantic confusion. A senior, trusted ranch hand, the same one who had held her father back, personally oversaw the transport. Titan walked calmly, his massive frame now exuding not menace, but a profound weariness and peace. He followed the scent of the little girl who walked just ahead of the truck, never letting her out of his sight. When they arrived back at the old ranch, he walked off the transport and straight to the sprawling live oak tree in the pasture, as if a year hadn't passed at all. He lay down in the shade, in the exact spot he always had, and closed his eyes. Lily followed, a worn copy of her favorite book in her hands. She sat down beside him, leaning her small back against his warm, solid side, and began to read aloud. Her father and grandfather watched from the porch, just as her grandmother once had. The cycle was complete. Titan's escape was not an act of aggression, but an act of desperation, a primal search for the only kindness he had ever known. He had broken free not to wreak havoc, but to find his way back to a memory. His story transformed him from a local terror into a legend, a living parable about the enduring power of love. He became a symbol of healing for the entire community, and for Lily, he was the last living piece of her grandmother's legacy, a 2,000-pound reminder that kindness is a seed that, once planted, can bloom in the most unexpected of places, proving that love, true love, never really leaves us. It just waits, patiently, to be remembered.